rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your host, Rick. Well, the alleged assassin has reportedly been captured. He was captured earlier today. And, of course, the immediate blowback from the left has been, shall we say, a complete attempt to try and basically say that, no, this is a right-winger. I've got some information here about some of the things that were found. I have some thoughts and opinions, and I don't think the left is going to like it. There have been attempts to assign this individual to specific groups, and regardless of where this guy falls realistically on the political spectrum, it is essentially we need to make sure that we understand that I'm not backing down from my original posts. I'm not backing down from my ideas or my stances with regards to the fact that leftism and leftist ideologies and leftist violent rhetoric and the normalization of mental illness and the normalization of criminal behavior is the cause of a lot of the violence that we're seeing today. I am not backing down from those stances. But this guy and this alleged, and again, we got to keep him in the alleged column because while he has been charged, he has not been proven to be the guy. Although the things are stacking up against him, but that being said, he's still the alleged assassin. He has been radicalized. And radicalism, for the most part, is on the left. Regardless of what they want to try and make you believe, radicalism is the majority, the vast majority is on the left. And I'm going to talk about a lot of that and what we know and give some context to some of the things that we are seeing in terms of the messaging that was found on the casings and his potential positions. And I'm not going to claim that I know this guy because I don't, that I can get inside his mind. I can't. He obviously, anyone who would take on a horrific act like this to basically murder or assassinate an innocent person is relatively going to have some type of mental illness on there. But I want to provide some context tonight in regards to all of this. So, before we get started, let's go ahead and take care of the normal business, which the first thing is the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight is the NYJ Camp Girls Band. I think I said that right. The NJY. So basically, it's some youth camp girls band, and they will be providing the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you are of mine, please stand, remove your hat if you're wearing one like me. Place your hand over your heart and follow along as they perform the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah.
All right, and I thank you for providing us with that. If you would like to hear your rendition of the pledge played here on the program, all you need to do is record yourself reciting or performing the pledge in your style, and then take that audio file, video file, whatever kind of file, and attach it to an email. Send it off To me, send it to fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. If you use your phone, apparently you can use the share option and send it to the exact same address. Fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online, and I will get you into the rotation. I only have 19. I like even numbers, so please, somebody, if you would, dust off and suppress that fear. Do the duty of recording yourself and send it off to me. I would love to see number 20 in the rotation. That would be fantastic. All right, let's go ahead with tonight's headline sponsor, which is, as soon as I get it up here, there we go. Tonight's headline sponsor is theflagshirt.com. They have patriotic styles for fall now available. They've got hoodies and pullover sweats, three-quarter zips, all in men's, women's, made in the USA. Kids, they have accessories that are all decked out in the red, white, and blue. Get yourself set up in the red, white, and blue for fall. Fall and cooler times are coming. And let's go ahead and do that. Go to theflagshirt.com. Check out all of their styles for fall and pick yourself up something. If you order $75 or more of product, they will give you free shipping. But I know not everybody can do $75. Either you don't want to do $75, you only want one shirt or whatever. So I'm going to help you out. So what you can do with that is you can go to flagshirt.americanperspective.online. That's flagshirt.americanperspective.online. And you can get a coupon code there that you copy and paste into the promo code box at checkout at theflagshirt.com and get $5 off your order on American Perspective. So head on over to flagshirt.americanperspective.online. That's flagshirt.americanperspective.online. Get presented with that coupon code. Once you take that coupon code, copy and paste it into the promo code box at theflagshirt.com, at the checkout at theflagshirt.com, and you will get $5 off your order on American Perspective. Go to theflagshirt.com and get yourself patriotized. All right, folks. So first things first, obviously there was a bunch of things, over the last several days that have come out with regards to Charlie Kirk. And the leftist for sure, tried to paint Charlie Kirk as some hating, individual, that somebody that was like spewing a bunch of hate and he was like a white Christian nationalist and all this other stuff. And it's anything but that. He was supportive of Israel. He was supportive of the Jewish people. He was supportive of, a lot of different things. And he was essentially, a overall decent individual. He always treated people with respect. When he would do his debates, he would respectfully wait for the person to essentially get their thoughts out and collect them and that type of stuff. You could see that, especially when he was, he would make sure to set his microphone down in between his comments so that he wouldn't necessarily jump right in, interrupt the person. Although, that did happen. Just that's what happens sometimes in debates. But he would attempt and make attempts to ensure that there was reasonable, peaceful, and essentially calm discussion and debate about the certain topics. He didn't go to college. He was, as I've said on this program before, but he was very, very knowledgeable on many different subjects. He was well educated from a separate point of view, rather than going through college and that. And he obviously created a successful business in Turning Point USA. He's a very successful individual, starting at the age of 18 and then working his way up until 31. And he, by all accounts, he improved himself and his skills as he went along. There were several people like Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, Donald Trump, all kinds of people from the right side of the aisle who all interacted with him and all knew from a very early start that this individual was going to go places and do things. But there are those on the left who continually try to tear things down and tear down things that are good in this society. And one of them, of course, was the New York Times. Now, this shouldn't surprise anybody, but here in the Daily Caller, the New York Times was forced to issue a correction after making an egregiously false claim about Charlie Kirk. So the New York Times falsely accused Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk of making an anti-Semitic claim on his podcast. The Times falsely accused Kirk of stating on his podcast in 2023 that Jewish communities are pushing the exact kind of hatred against whites that they want people to stop using against them. Now, here's part of the problem, and this is why selective editing comes into play, and this is part of the reason why you cannot, under any circumstances, take anything that is posted on either the mainstream media or especially in the internet at face value without checking and verifying the veracity of the claim. See, what Kirk was doing at the time was that he was citing a tweet. He was reading a tweet making that particular claim and was critiquing it. See, those of us who do opinion shows like this one, and again, I'm relatively young in comparison to a lot of others, but those of us who do these opinion shows, we expose ourselves to having our words being taken out of context. Context is a huge factor when it comes in to play, and just like, even Donald Trump has had this from all of this, okay? Anybody who puts themselves out on any kind of format like this, whether it's video or audio or both, you have the unfortunate situation where you can have your words being taken out of context. And when you do that, that means that there are places like the New York Times that love to lie about people. They're a propagandist outlet, and they love to lie, especially about those of us on the right or in the conservative movement, that they are going to grab your words and they are going to twist them into something that is extremely incorrect. So the correction that was sent out was quote this, an earlier version of this article described incorrectly an anti-Semitic statement that Charlie Kirk had made on an episode of his podcast. He was quoting a statement from a post on social media and went on to critique it. It was not his own statement. The correction reads. And in this particular case, I'm just going to, point out that, this is the danger that you have when you have open speech and free speech, and especially if you're brave enough to put yourself out there, like I am right now, to be able to discuss and debate and put out information and viewpoints, opinions. So, again, just to point out that Kirk actually clarified that not all Jews are pushing hatred onto white people, just like not all blacks are hating white people. Not all whites hate others. And you can't, and you cannot in any respect, and this is, again, part of the problem with all of this, is that When you do things like stereotypical or stereotyping, in particular, you become the same kind of individual that people like the New York Times are. And I'm pointing them out in particular. Believe me, there's a lot of them out there. But you have to be able to, and this is where critical thinking skills come into play. You have to be able to take whatever information that you can glean from these people and be able to dissect it and turn it into, or at least realize from the viewpoint that these people are putting it out, you need to understand their context on the whole thing. And the New York Times has been shown to be relatively anti-Semitic. This goes all the way back to World War II, that they would actually not call out Hitler for the Holocaust. And in fact, in reporting on the Holocaust, it has been demonstrated that they tried to gloss over the Holocaust, especially back in World War II. So, anyway, so you need to understand that there are plenty of forces that are out there that are going to attempt to disparage, especially somebody who is being elevated, let's say, because of their unfortunate demise. And it's not just places like the New York Times or anything else. There are plenty of other people who celebrated in Charlie Kirk's death. And it's these kinds of people that I'm just going to point out once again. It's these kinds of people that are fomenting the entire situation that we have in today's political environment. It is these types of people who are, and especially these folks that are in, let's say, positions of authority, positions of influence, positions where what you say can be taken by somebody who has a mental illness or a particular mindset and bent toward destruction that can grab onto these things and use them as justification for what it is that they are doing. Now, keep in mind, we can't sit here and necessarily blame these people for anyone's actions if they are not directly involved, such as the congressional baseball shooter who claimed to have been following Bernie Sanders. Or much more recently, the gentleman in Minnesota who claims that Tim Walz told him to kill Amy Klobuchar. And he ended up killing a Minnesota state representative. You cannot sit here and necessarily blame the individuals who might have pushed a mentally ill person toward their end goal or end game or end task. But what you can do is you can explain and completely assign blame to the words that are being used, the temperature, the rhetoric, the tone in which you are doing things and saying things that would cause somebody who is mentally unstable to go in that direction and take your words as basically gospel truth. And this is exactly why we have a problem in this country, because of the fact that the largest group that does this type of activity, that states these things with vehemence, is people in the Democrat left. Here's an example. And these are the supposed progressives that are out there. Now, this is a piece in Town Hall. I didn't add this into the show notes, but here's a piece in Town Hall, and here's some of the people that talked about this. So, this is Nicole Gallagher Kiner, who's a public DA in Montana, And she attacked Charlie Kirk after he was assassinated and claimed that Charlie Kirk deserved to die. Okay. You have this other person, Margot Richardson, according to Andy No, who is a wealth manager in Norristown, Pennsylvania, who celebrated the killing of Charlie Kirk. We have this person here, Danielle Mundell. She works with disabled patients at a place in DeWitt, Iowa. These are her words. Says, I hope it was an accurate shot. If nothing else, I hope he can't talk anymore. This next one is by an Oskaloosa teacher celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk and calling him a Nazi. There's even more. Here's one, and I've seen this one running around. This is a man by the name of Christopher Rispoli, who is owner of the Gentle Care Animal Hospital in Edmond, Oklahoma. And he suggested on social media that people should be inspired to kill more people after Charlie Kirk. And there's tons of this all over the place. Libs of TikTok has been highlighting these people. Here's an example of one. This is a nurse who works at the Henry Ford Health. Responding to Charlie's assassination, he got the day he deserved. This is a healthcare people. This is a healthcare individual. Here's another teacher, Austin Schroff, in Huntersville, North Carolina. He reportedly shared photos on Facebook mocking Charlie Kirk and was saying, go straight to hell, asshole. I mean, Anthony Gongora claims to work at the Phoenix Children's Hospital as a medical laboratory scientist. He was celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder on social media. See, this is part of the problem here, folks. And I could go on, but this is part of the problem. Okay? This is part of the problem. When you give up your humanity, when you give up on the idea that human life, no matter what kind of human life, is worthless, especially if you deem it that human life of a certain, political persuasion, skin persuasion, just whatever kind of stereotypical outlet it is, when you give up on the idea that that human life is no longer worth something, that's where you start falling into the darkness and into the hate-filled scenarios that you're dealing with. And especially when you start putting those thoughts onto social media and onto chat boards and all types of other things. Again, this is an indication. This is an indication of the mental illness problem that we have in this country. It is much more widespread than just these manifestations that you are seeing by these individuals who are performing these horrific acts. This is, and I'm just pointing it out, this is because of the fact that it has become socially acceptable for things like this to essentially be normalized in society. And this is where we are. Is the normalization of hate. The normalization of a lack of decency and humanity. This is where we are today. Studies have shown that people in Gen Z are more likely to allow and actually encourage violence in the form of and in the political sphere in order to get what you want politically. And we sit and wonder why this is a problem. We sit and wonder, and you know, again, these people sit here and they blame the guns. They talk about blaming the guns. The guns are just a tool. This is an indication of a sickness that is gone beyond simple. I can't even think of the terminology that I want. This is a sickness that is permeating throughout our social structure. It's been demonstrated by the fact that you have a woman, a completely innocent woman, getting stabbed on a train, and literally 0 people out of probably the 15 folks that were in that same rail car doing anything to help her. None. This is a sickness of our society. And so regardless of where you're sitting on the political spectrum, the acceptance of these types of activities is belying a change within our society that is extremely disturbing. Now, let me move on to Charlie Kirk and the Charlie Kirk's assassin or alleged assassin. But first, before I do that, let's talk for a minute. Let me go ahead and get a sponsor in here. All right. I wake up every morning with 16 ounces of good old coffee. I put it in my father like no other coffee cup, and I drink it every single morning. And believe me, it helps me to wake up. That caffeine and just the smell of the coffee gets it going in my nose. But if you still haven't tried 1775 coffee, now is your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped. There's a limited number of units available. You're getting the bold dark roast that hits hard. You'll be able to taste the smooth medium roast. And you can try the Vitality Mushroom Coffee that has clean energy and laser focus with 0 crash. All of these coffees are single origin, small batch, toxin-free, and mold-free. Plus, you're also going to be getting, my personal favorite, a gold spoon clip, because freedom isn't scooped with plastic. You'll be receiving a frother that's strong enough to stir up your coffee, and, of course, your mother-in-law's opinions. And believe me, she's going to have opinions on everything. You'll also be receiving a black 1775 tumbler. It's $170 worth of coffee and gear, which is yours for just $99. This is for the ones who have been watching 1775 coffee blow up on Rumble and wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler alert, it is. Go to 1775coffee.com. Yes, those are the numbers. 1775, the word coffee.com /studio. / is your question mark key for those that aren't really sure. 1775coffee.com /studio and grab your starter kit before they are gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something, just like Rumble does. Go to 1775coffee.com /studio and grab your starter kit today. All right. So let's go over what we know currently about the alleged assassin. I'm not going to give the man's name, but he is a 22-year-old individual. And the weapon that was recovered, as I've already explained to you, had several messages on the bullet casings. Now, there is several debates on what they actually stand for, and I'll get to those in just a second. But what we do know is that this individual was raised around weapons. Once he was identified, they were able to go and search his Facebook and his, other Instagram and connect the dots to his father, who, by the way, the father is supposedly the one who actually turned him in after the son admitted that he was the one in the videos. We also know that the young man, the 22-year-old man, we know his race, although that doesn't mean much. What we do not know necessarily is his religious affiliation. There's been several questions with regards to that. There have been several inferences. Just because he happens to be in Utah, many people believe that he is Mormon. And while the percentage of that does increase, the fact that they live in Utah, that doesn't necessarily mean that he is. They also say that he's been assigned a Christian religious value. Again, there's nothing to indicate that he has of which religious belief he carries. What we do know, though, is that he was raised around guns. He was raised in what appears to be, at least his parents appear to have been Republicans, registered Republicans. His voting is a little more obscure. In fact, he was registered to vote. However, he did not vote in the last couple of elections. And when he registered, he did not claim any particular political party, which further obscures what could potentially be a motive for all of this. Now, just to be clear, we do not have a definitive motive as of yet. However, there are some suggestions in what the individual left. Now, according to the police in the statement, he pre-planned this. There are statements that they were able to recover from Discord. Now, there's no mention as to where these messages were left or this conversation happened, but it was the Discord was able to grab them, and obviously, and there is suggestions that he spoke exactly about what he was going to do. There's details within those messages that are details that are a part of the actual act. For an example, leaving the rifle in a towel and making sure that he has to drop off the rifle and that he needed a rifle, a very specific rifle. He also had messages reportedly on Discord that talked about doing engravings on the bullets and those kinds of things that are matching up with the actual event. Now, speaking of the messages on the bullet casings, many people are trying to attribute them to one group or another. However, there seems to be one commonality across them. And that happens to be a particular video game. So, one of the messages that leads us to this, one of the messages happens to be a key pairing, a keystroke pairing that is initiated when you want a certain bomb, and they call it, give me just a second here. They call it the Eagle 500K bomb. And the sequence is an up arrow, a right arrow, and then a down, down, down arrow in order to release this bomb that is a part of this video game. The video game is called Helldivers. Let me tell you what the Helldivers, this is the plot of Helldivers, okay? Now, Helldivers is a multiplayer role-playing game, and here is the overall plot. You are fighting for freedom across a hostile galaxy in this third-person cooperative team shooting game. And this is posted on PlayStation.com as to the plot of the of the game. It says, do you believe in freedom? Can you stand in the face of oppression and defeat the defenseless? Wage war for peace? Die for democracy? He goes, join forces with up to 3 friends and wreak havoc on an alien scourge threatening the safety of your home planet called Super Earth. In this multiplayer co-op shooter for the PlayStation 3 and PC. Step into the boots of the Helldivers, an elite class of soldiers whose mission is to spread peace, liberty, and what's called managed democracy, using the biggest, baddest, and most explosive tools in the galaxy. So, yeah. Now, what seems to be common across this is the term freedom, democracy, and or the managed democracy, and also talking about liberty, and of course peace. Here's the thing. In his casings that he etched, these references also are tied, apparently, to the Helldiver 2 ecosphere. So the game itself, obviously, is sort of a tongue-in-cheek, let's say, joke, critique of military dictatorships, and has references, of course, to fascism and colonialism. And where do we hear those 2 words? Well, we hear those two words often coming from the left. Now, one of the casings had a reference to Bella Ciao, and which Bella Ciao, by the way, is an Italian song that back under the Second World War was dedicated to resistance fighters who were fighting against the occupying Nazi forces. Now, he also had a couple of other messages that appear to be referencing or making fun of being homosexual, and also of furries. Now, people ask what furries are. Well, furries are basically people who believe that they are animals. Okay? Again, we're talking about a mentally disturbed, at the very least, individual. So one of the messages that was engraved on one of the bullets is notices, bulges, OWO, what's this? And that's a reference to an internet meme that is connected to furries and the role-playing community. Basically, what it is supposed to, based on my research, what it's supposed to reference is, of course, the bulges have to deal with the male anatomy in your pants. Getting excited about whatever it is that you are talking about in terms of what's this. It's obviously a reference to, sexual arousal or whatever. And the OWO is referring reportedly to an emoji that is used by furries online as sort of a cutesy symbol. Another one of the messages on the casings read, if you read this, you are gay, laughing my ass off, LMAO. All of this is just basically a bunch of references to essentially a broken-minded individual. Now, some people are saying, or some people are calling out the fact that there are messages with regards to a group known as groupers, and that's GROYPER. Now, these groupers, or gropers, however you want to call it, is is a name of a group that is a far-right group, an alt-right. And it's assigned to nationalists and alt-right nationalists and conservatives that are critical of mainstream conservatism, and is supposed to be tied to the political commentator Nick Fuentes. Now, here's the problem that I have with trying to assign him to this group. As of right now, we don't have much in the way of an understanding of whether or not he actually subscribed to any kind of grouper mentality. Yes, there is a picture or a photo of him apparently in a position and in the happenstance wearing clothes that have been used in a grouper meme, because grouper is basically tied to a toad in terms of this. And the question in all of this, of course, is, can we necessarily assign this to like a white nationalist group? Now, let's keep in mind here that white nationalism, on its face, white nationalism is actually a fascist ideology. Because Nazism, it was a form of white nationalism. It definitely was a nationalism, and the Aryan nation was white. The idea of the white nationalists. So when you tie this to the anti-fascist messages that were written on the other bullets, and I'm trying to recall right off the top of my head, which again was the Bella Ciao, which is anti-fascism, and the symbol or the other engraving, which was "Hey fascist, catch." It's a little difficult to actually tie him necessarily to the grouper ideology, because the grouper ideology and the Nick Fuentes ideology is essentially neo-Nazism, white nationalism, alternative right, and more fascist beliefs. And so we can't necessarily assign him into that group. But again, keep in mind here, this is wrapped around the game of Helldiver. That is the commonality between all of these messages that are here. And the Helldiver game is driven toward what the leftists are pushing. And so this is part of the reason why I am saying I personally believe, until otherwise shown or proven or stated from the accused assassin himself, is that he subscribed or was tied to the leftist movement. That his ideology and his political leanings, because he did, according to sources who questioned, family members who questioned, he hated Charlie Kirk because he felt that Charlie Kirk was spreading a message of hate, was spreading a message and messages of hate, and that Charlie Kirk was wrong. He didn't understand any of his stances. And that doesn't fit with an alternate right viewpoint, although the groupers do have a history of attacks on Turning Point USA in particular, which is, again, part of where he could have been playing in those kinds of groups, although we don't have any proof about that, except for the fact that he's tied back to this Helldiver 2 game. But still, understandably, these kinds of things, a rational mind is going to have a difficulty grasping and understanding. And we may never actually fully understand what this individual's motivations were in terms of killing Charlie Kirk, other than we know for a fact that he hated Charlie Kirk. He disagreed with Charlie Kirk's viewpoints. You also need to understand, too, that the grouper ideology is also anti-Semitic in nature. They, again, believe, many of them, in terms of the alt-right, believe in the purity of the white race. And so the Jewish people are not looked upon with any favorability within this group. And so Charlie Kirk, being the fact that he advocated and was supportive of Israel and the Jewish people, that could have raised the man's ire should he be attached to that group. But I'm still contending this does not sound like a person who was necessarily in the ideological group, because it seems to be a mix of different places and different ideologies and thought processes. That this seems to be a mentally disturbed individual whose hatred was fomented by his interactions online, in social media, on Discord. And I'm not calling Discord bad. Keep in mind, these services, they are not necessarily the cause. But what is the cause, and what we need to understand and recognize, is that there really, realistically, there's very few groups that are out there. It is all kinds of extremism. And extremism in any kind of form does need to be denounced. However, the majority is leftist extremism. And the whole idea of Antifa, which, again, the anti-fascist, hey fascist catch, is not necessarily tied to the alt-right, where Nick Fuentes lives. It is tied to the left and Antifa itself. So as of right now, we do not have very much of a total picture into this man's motivations. And we will probably see in hopefully the near future some of the clarification in terms of what this individual's motivation might have been. Now, at the same time, you cannot assign this individual to any right-wing conservative movement either. Because first of all, a conservative at its core does not necessarily subscribe to democracy in terms of pure democracy, like the left have been trying and have co-opted that language, which again, looking back at the game itself uses the term democracy. That is a leftist terminology. Most conservatives on the right, and especially the Charlie Kirk kind of right, moderate conservative, the middle conservative, the actual conservative, not the alt-right conservatives. We all look at democracy and we say, no, we're a constitutional republic. We are not a democracy. And so this is, again, another indication that makes me believe that it is more of the leftist ideology that radicalized this young man. Because democracy at its base was actually abhorred by our founding fathers. That's part of the reason why we became a constitutional republic. Because they recognized that a pure democracy, and again, there are several indications of this. For an example, the idea that in a democracy, the majority rules. Meaning that if you have 50.0001% of the vote, and you could even go farther than that, that you are the masters of the democracy. That isn't what America is set up on. America is set up on the principle that the individual is the most important, that the individual is protected from things like the mob. That's a constitutional republic. And any known conservative is going to be able to discuss that and be able to articulate that. So this is part of the reason why this is an indication that is there that could lead to the final result being the fact that this person was radicalized by the leftist rhetoric that is being tossed around. Especially when you are looking at things like the idea that Trump is a threat to democracy and so on and so forth. So the left can sit there and try to explain this away and try to say, oh, he was an alt-right person. No, I am not in that camp. And I'm not going to ever be in that camp until something comes up that proves otherwise. And it's certain things like the Southern Poverty Law Center that went ahead and put the Turning Point USA on a hate map with what is essentially the Klan chapters. That is another indication. Because again, the Southern Poverty Law Center, okay, which is a leftist organization, by the way, listed TPUSA as a hate group and also lists the Ku Klux Klan, which is a white supremacist group, as a hate group. Now, the Ku Klux Klan definitely is a hate group. Turning Point USA is not a hate group. But because of things like this, and again, keep in mind, the SPLC is a leftist organization. You see stuff like this and you cannot help but wonder, well, okay, if this young man is so deep in the idea that hate, that TPUSA and Charlie Kirk specifically were spreading hate, that is a subscription on the left side of the aisle, not the alt-right, and definitely not the conservatives. So there's a mix and a dichotomy in this case. And again, keep in mind that the mind of a mentally deranged individual is most likely not going to be able to be comprehended by someone with reason and logic, because there is, let's face it, there's no reason or logic to any of this. But the fact of the matter is that the dial of the temperature, the rhetoric, especially that is going on right now, and from the last 4 years, has clearly been from the left. Fascism in and of itself is a leftist, or, well, in this case, an alt-right ideology. When you tie it to things like Nazism and the Mussolini political party that they created. Being anti against that would indicate that you're on the left. You see where the rhetoric is coming into play, the rhetoric. These are all things that are all tied together that, as far as I'm concerned, gives me an indication that this gentleman, regardless of whether he registered, as a Republican or not, whether he registered, whether he voted, which he didn't register as any political party. He didn't vote. By the way, too, there's rumors, although I haven't had it confirmed yet, but there's rumors that he donated to Trump, and he's seen, because of Trump being a Republican back in 2020, I would imagine back in 2020, you got to remember, he's still living at home. He may still be living at home, being 22. But considering the fact that he was living at home at the time and being in a Republican household, that yes, he is going to wear Republican supportive gear. But the key to all this is the fact that the parents and friends of the parents, the friends, the people who have testified so far and given statements to the police have all indicated that the man all of a sudden became political in recent years. That he wasn't political in his past, and he all of a sudden became political. Which indicates, no matter what, that he was radicalized in some kind of way. Because you don't all of a sudden turn political for no reason. And especially, you don't all of a sudden turn political, but don't declare a political party and don't vote. That is more of an indication of a radicalization within a certain political sect. And in terms of that, it's more than likely the extremist sect. Now, there's some indications that he did go to college for a short period of time, and there's also some indications that he may have actually graduated. There's, again, differing viewpoints and differing ideas as to where he might have been brought in and indoctrinated, but I do believe that the majority of his indoctrination, if it occurred, could stem from the groups that he hung out with regards to his choice of game. And I'm not saying that gaming is bad. Gaming is not bad. You have to be able to differentiate what happens in the game with reality. But unfortunately, some people lack the mental capability to be able to do so. And so in this particular case, what he may have been believing that he was doing is protecting his super Earth from Charlie Kirk and his hate-filled rhetoric. Again, I'm still of the camp that this man is going to end up predominantly coming out as following more of a leftist ideology than anything else. These are the things that we know. I've given you what I know. I've given you my opinion on the situation, but I honestly believe that when everything finally comes to light, that he will have been radicalized more toward the left than anything else. And even though there are some commonalities to the alt-right, there are those ties can be tied or can be led to both places, both the left and the right. It could have been a mockery because those phrases that are used in the grouper world are literally mockeries of those others. And so this is essentially the question, and we may or may not ever have an answer. But realistically speaking, this is a symptom of a much larger disease, which is essentially the pushing by the vast majority from the left-wing side of the acceptability of violence in order to gain your political aspirations. That is the fight that we have. And the Democratic left, and again, I advocate for this. I was in a discussion with someone today, and I basically stated that when you tear down the foundational values, principles, and values that you as a country agree to, which in this case is the American values, when you tear down that foundation, you can no longer have a common ground or reconciliation with those that do not share those common principles and values. And that is where we are today. That is where we are today. All right, folks, that is it for this evening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, head on over to rumble.com, get yourself an account. It is free. And once you are signed up and signed in, make sure that you search up and follow the American Perspective channel. When you hit that green follow button, you'll get notified every time that I go live. Also, too, don't forget, tomorrow night is Saturday. Saturday is 1 hour later, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time is when I will return for another episode. We will see you tomorrow night. Have a great rest of your evening. God bless Charlie Kirk's family, and God bless America. Good night, everyone.